A student for the last 4 years. He's a professor of recreation, actually professor emeritus, was the head of the Department of Health and Recreation at Western Washington University. One of my favorite scholars, Charlie Sylvester.
Okay. Here we go. Sip of water. A couple preliminaries before I begin. First, with reference to the emeritus piece of my title, I'm going to be sharing a Latin phrase with you momentarily. Emeritus is Latin for out of merit. And I'm sure I have more than a few colleagues who would attest that I ran out of merit well before I retired. So just to keep the record straight there. Secondly, a correction to your program where it generously lists me as a leisure historian. Well, mark that, pen that out, and put in student, because I think that whatever success I've been able to achieve, it's remembering that I've remained a lifelong student from the very beginning. Also, I love irony, very interesting, just the ironies that pop up as I listen to the other speakers, and Laura's reference to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and what may have been perceived as a slip-up in reference to life, liberty, and property actually wasn't. Jefferson had read John Locke, the British philosopher, and John Locke's formulation of life, liberty, and what would have been equivalent with happiness was life, liberty, and property, or estate. And it's not by accident, it is thoroughly significant that Jefferson purposely changed from property and all of the implications surrounding wealth and the growing capitalism at that time to the, yes, almighty, vague and ambiguous word of happiness. But I think that's one thing we can thank Jefferson and his like for. So also, I want to make a quick apology that if with the first thing that I'm going to be talking about, if this brings back memory of something that you've been trying to forget about for months, the third Republican debate. But during the third Republican debate, Jeb Bush punctuated his criticism of Marco Rubio's spotty attendance in the Senate with the swipe, the Senate. What is that like? A French work week? You get like 3 days where you have to show up. Now, evoking the image of the French whiling away their time in cafes is an absolute slam dunk in a debate among Republicans. However, it would not have scored well among some of the Republic's founders, the likes of Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams. Any one of them might have defended the dignity of leisure by quoting the Roman poet Virgil, Deus nobis haec otia facit, which variously translates as God has given us this leisure or tranquility. You see, for the founders of the American Republic, leisure was a blessing, not a pejorative. According to historian Daniel Rogers, the first American dream, before the others shoved it rudely aside, had not been one of work, but of leisure. They borrowed such metaphors as the Garden of Eden and Greece's Golden Age, providing visions of the new world that would have a new order in which leisure would be among the fruits of America's cornucopia of goods at that time. Up to the Revolution and in the early stages of it, leisure was the ideal of the gentleman class, as it had been at least since ancient Athens. And given the choice, common men and women more generally would have preferred leisure to labor. Now, it's according to the eminent historian Gordon Wood, the American Revolution was greatly responsible for overturning traditional beliefs and attitudes toward work and leisure. Desiring a more egalitarian democracy, laborers, tradesmen, businessmen sought equal footing by praising the dignity of work and by disparaging aristocratic leisure as wasteful idleness. Consequently, leisure generally was devalued and work rose to become the gospel of America, hence the success of Bush's barb during the Republican debate. Still, while leisure was being displaced, being marginalized, it was not altogether vanquished. An ideal that had existed for the better part of history that simply doesn't evaporate that easily. In fact, several of the founders anticipated its revival suitable for a democratic republic. And I thoroughly believe that if they were here with us today, at least some of them, they would be absolutely shocked by the current state of affairs surrounding work and leisure. So in the brief time that I have available today, I can only provide a very, very general picture that lacks the nuances and the complexities, the debates, the disagreements, the unsettled questions that are part and parcel of history. Still, focusing on Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, I believe I can provide enough of an argument that from the eyes of at least some of the founders, the vision of a truly great America prominently included leisure. Now, you only have to step back a short distance from Thomas Jefferson, the iconic statesman, author of the Declaration of Independence, to appreciate how much leisure contributed to Jefferson the man. Now, Jefferson's loves, his interests, and his pursuits included, first and foremost, his family, and then followed in no particular order by wine, horseback riding, service to his country, architecture, farming, and generally the arts, humanities, and social sciences. Jefferson was arguably America's greatest Renaissance man. Of course, it's well known and needs to be remembered that Jefferson's leisure was acquired on the backs of his slaves, which is a reason to prosecute Jefferson for hypocrisy, but by no means does it invalidate leisure. And it's a reminder that along with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, justice is one of the cardinal principles of a democracy and one that continues to challenge us today. Now, the word leisure appears numerous times in Jefferson's writing, usually used to convey when I'm free or when I have an opportunity. But he didn't offer an explicit theory of leisure. So besides what can be taken from the way that Jefferson lived, we need to explore his other ideas and infer from it what Jefferson thought the opportunity of leisure provided. Not surprisingly, happiness is among those. Now, Jefferson's recipe for the good life was straightforward. It consisted of the natural desire of happiness, blended with all manner of human virtue or excellence, baked in worthy pursuits. In his words, happiness is the aim of life. Virtue is the foundation of happiness, for without virtue, happiness cannot be. Interesting occupations are essential to happiness. Indeed, the whole art of being happy consists in the art of finding employment. A mind always employed is always happy. This is the true secret, the great recipe for felicity. Now, keep in mind that the words occupation and employment were not limited to paid activity during Jefferson's day. They included any productive use of one's time, paid as well as free or leisure time. Now, Jefferson regarded honest labor highly, his ideal being the virtuous farmer. Yet farming was not hitched to unrelenting labor. Along with the economically productive periods of labor, farmers had interludes of leisure in which they had opportunity to study and to enjoy such simple pleasures as music and dance, and in this case, a rigorous game of leapfrog. And where Jefferson criticized the 16-hour days typical of European manufacturing, leaving the workers, in his words, no time to think, He praised American farmers who, in their leisure, again in his words, had time to read Homer. Now, I wonder how many farmers actually read Homer, but I think the point is Jefferson recognized that not just pursuit, but the pursuits, the actual engagement that provides happiness is both material and cultural, requiring not only labor, but leisure as well. It's also well known that Jefferson believed in limited government. The only orthodox object of the institution of government is to secure the greatest degree of happiness possible to the general mass of those associated under it. Again, his conception of happiness included all pursuits that contributed to human excellence and well-being, including honest labor, family, political duty, social intercourse, nature, physical activity, and the arts and sciences and humanities. You get a sense then that Jefferson's reference to paradise in the following quote, while based on work, involves something more than labor alone, that something more being leisure. How soon the labor of men would make a paradise of the whole earth were it not for misgovernment and diversion of all his energies from their proper object, the happiness of man. Insert women. If we can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people, they must become happy. Now, Jefferson's impression of what this happy paradise might look like is exposed in his many reflections on retirement, which he anxiously anticipated, including the following in a letter to Pierre Auguste Adet. My books, my family, my friends, and my farm furnish more than enough to occupy me the remainder of my life and of that tranquil occupation most analogous to my moral and physical constitution. Today's syndrome of work and spend would have appalled Jefferson, an indication of a society that had clearly lost its way. And I believe that he would have recommended to us, in his own words, it is neither wealth nor splendor, but tranquility and occupation that give happiness. Tranquility, by the way, a synonym for leisure during that period. And where Jefferson is mainly suggestive about leisure, Benjamin Franklin is more explicit. The iconic Franklin was also an ironic figure. The historian Gordon Wood described him as the patron saint of business, somebody that Donald Trump would have no trouble conjuring as a kindred spirit, idealizing hard work and wealth. And the renowned sociologist Max Weber depicted Franklin as America's version of the Protestant ethic, extolling industriousness, frugality, wealth, and with a constant eye on turning pennies into fortunes. Well, Weber misunderstood Franklin, failing to dig deeply enough into the character or to get beyond the character to understand the real man. Indeed, Franklin preached industry, frugality, and wealth, yet not for their own sake, not for their own sake. He saw nothing noble or wise about the person, in his words, kept his nose all his life to the grindstone, choosing to live to work rather than work to live. Rhetorically asking, can wealth give happiness? Franklin emphatically answered, look round and see what gay misery, what gay distress, what splendid misery. That wealth is bankrupt and insolvent gold. For Franklin, sufficient work and wealth promised a greater prize, the prize of leisure. Taking pains to explain that a life of leisure and a life of laziness are two things, he said that free time was for anything useful beyond what he described as life's necessaries. And according to the historian Wilson Moses, Franklin made enviable good use of his leisure, occupying it with study and science, philanthropic projects, social intercourse, service to his country, extensive travel throughout Europe. Franklin indeed personified the American dream of getting ahead by working hard. But where he was headed was not hard work and wealth as final destinations, but instead toward the richness of personal development and social progress purchased through leisure. Indeed, the idea of progress through leisure was thematic in the early American experience. What's only implied in Jefferson's reference to a paradise on earth is manifest in Franklin's oft-quoted letter to Benjamin Vaughan. If every man and woman would work for 4 hours each day on something useful, that labor would produce sufficient to procure all the necessaries and comforts of life. Want and misery would be banished from the world, and the rest of the 24 hours might be leisure and pleasure. Franklin wasn't being whimsical or quixotic. He was deadly serious, as his letter to the Pennsylvania Gazette attests. To the printers of the Gazette, in the settling of the new countries, the first care of the planters must be to provide and secure the necessaries of life. This engrosses their attention and affords them little time to think of anything farther. We may therefore excuse our ancestors that they established no academy or college in this province. Agriculture and mechanic arts were of the most immediate importance. The culture of minds by the finer arts and sciences was necessarily postponed to times of wealth and leisure, implying that that time has come. Since those times are come, it is thought a proposal for establishing an academy in this province will not be deemed unseasonable. A remark made in a letter from John Adams to his wife Abigail reinforces this vision of progress, a sense of moving beyond the toil and trouble of starting a new nation to a time of peace and prosperity, tranquility in which the arts of leisure would flourish. I must study politics and war that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. My sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain. The link between leisure and progress appeared in other ways. The encryption of 2 state seals, Georgia and Virginia, at one time contained Virgil's Deus Nobis Haec Odia Facit, offering this vision of progressing beyond material prosperity to the fruits of leisure. However, God has given us this leisure was derived from the ancient Greek ideal of leisured gentlemen whose leisure was derived from the labor of slaves, women, and commoners. Rife with the evident inequality, it was really poorly suited even then for an America that was beginning to reject old world aristocratic values in favor of greater egalitarianism. Moreover, the Puritan fever of labor, the fear of idleness, coupled with the rise of industrial capitalism in the North, helped further to shove the American dream, the forgotten dream, aside. The message that leisure was integral to true progress would have to wait for other messengers who were able to speak to American egalitarianism and against the business ethos that was becoming America's calling card. Well, among those 19th century messengers, Walt Whitman's voice stood out. Ben Honeycutt's book, Free Time, The Forgotten American Dream, is a fantastic read. I highly recommend it. And one chapter tells the story of Walt Whitman's notion of higher progress. In a nutshell, Whitman argued that America, for all its progress up to that point, was still one stage removed from true freedom. He believed that America had made progress toward political freedom, the fundamental rights of a free society, and economic freedom, the opportunity to achieve material prosperity. But a third freedom still remained, which led to what he called higher progress. And he described it in this way. For the new world indeed, after two grand stages of preparation strata, I perceive that now a third stage, being ready for and without which the other two were useless, with unmistakable signs appears. The first stage was the planning and putting on record the political foundation rights of immense masses of people, indeed all people. This is the American program, not for classes, but for universal man. The second stage relates to material prosperity, wealth, produce, labor-saving machines, iron, cotton, local, state, and continental railways. Whitman conceived what he called the third culminating and defining stage toward higher progress as a community organized in running order, powers judiciously delegated, farming, building, trade, courts, mails, schools, elections, all attended to, and then the rest of life, the main thing, freely branching and blossoming in each individual and bearing golden fruit. I can see there in every young and old man after his kind and in every woman after hers, a true personality developed proportionately in body, mind, and spirit. And the final freedom, the gateway to higher progress, was leisure, the freedom from labor. Well, Whitman helped to revive the forgotten American dream of progress nourished by free time. It became a progressive refrain, not only echoed by his fellow romantics, Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, but in the following century by serious people, social reformer Jane Addams, economist John Maynard Keynes, architect Frank Lloyd Wright, and University of Chicago president, leader in liberal education, Robert Hutchings. And of course, it remains the dream of everyone gathered here, and I believe the vast majority of Americans, as we learn from the countless polls, not only Americans, but people throughout the world. Well, there's so much more that could be said, but as usual, time doesn't permit, and best to get me off the stage in 20 minutes anyhow. That's enough of a dose for today. I want to refer, though, to Michael Moore's wonderful documentary, Where to Invade Next. Many of us had an opportunity to see a segment of it yesterday. And as you know, Moore travels the globe, staking claim to progressive ideas and practices in other countries to bring back to America. For example, as we saw yesterday, he invades Italy for its reasonable work hours and guaranteed vacation. France for its nutritious, well-prepared meals for school children. Slovenia for its free college education. In the end, Moore ironically discovers that some of the ideas that he sought in other countries to return to America actually originated here, such as women's suffrage and the struggle for the 8-hour day. Well, we know that America was also founded on another good idea. Not endless work, but leisure for everyone, as one of the ends or goals of work in order to enjoy the true products of progress: art, sport, health, service, family, friendship, community, just to name a handful. So, in an egalitarian spirit, I wish to conclude my brief presentation with Deus nobis haec odia facit et unum omnes. Thank you.